Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today is our News Watch unit. It's also our all English lecture, so we're going to try to speak 100% in English. Although that's going to be hard to do because one story is about a Chinese person whose name is in Chinese, so please forgive us if we say those words out loud, but we have to do that. Because we're talking about Jin Young, who passed away last year at the age of 94. We'll talk about his life and times. And then we're also going to go to Washington, D.C. to talk about a Starbucks there, where everybody is signing in ASL, American Sign Language. So if you're deaf there, you could order a cup of coffee without having to point or without having to write your order down on a piece of paper because they don't know sign language. This is the place for you if you are deaf.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. They actually had the first deaf Starbucks store, Kuala Lumpur location in Malaysia. So yeah, we're going to learn about that, what they're doing to accommodate the deaf community. That's kind of cool. And also talk about this legendary author, Jin Young, who passed away last year at the very ripe old age of 94. That's a long life. We're going to read through both of these stories first, and then we'll be back.
Legendary wuxia author Jin Young passes away. Celebrated author Jin Young, whose novels are some of the most widely read in contemporary Chinese language literature, died aged 94 on October 30th, 2018. This writer, whose real name was Louis Cha, was known for his novels in the wuxia genre, a style characterized by martial arts and adventure. He is credited with helping revive the genre in modern times and is known as part of the tripod of wuxia, along with authors Gu Long and Liang Yusheng. From 1955 to 1972, Cha published 14 wuxia novels and novellas as Jin Young. He mainly released these in installments via the Hong Kong newspaper Ming Bao, which he co-founded. Cha's writings blended history, poetry, fantasy, and Chinese philosophy to create deep, complex universes and characters. Because his Chinese prose contains many layers of meaning, few of his books have been translated into other languages. However, this hasn't stopped Cha from becoming one of the best-selling Asian authors of all time. Today, his works continue to be celebrated through hundreds of movie, TV, and video game adaptations.
Deaf-friendly Starbucks signing store opens in the U.S. Starbucks recently made waves by opening a unique new signing store in Washington, D.C., U.S. Much of the store's staff is deaf or hearing impaired, and all can communicate in American Sign Language, ASL. The location in D.C. is the coffee chain's second signing store, which they decided to open after the success of the first one in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The shop possesses a number of features aimed at improving accessibility for the hard of hearing. When their orders are ready, customers' names are displayed on a screen instead of being called out. Customers and staff can also type back and forth to order via a two-way keyboard at the counter. The signing store is located near Gallaudet University, the world's only university with a curriculum fully designed around the deaf community. It already seems that its students and staff are thrilled to have a place off campus where they can communicate freely and easily. Many hope the store will help bring together deaf and hearing people and showcase diverse possibilities for communication.
Okay, everybody, it's time for us to discuss the contents of today's lesson. It's our all-English lecture. Save for the words we're going to speak in the first part here in Chinese because we got to say this dude's name in Chinese. But in any case, the headline of our first story is Legendary Wuxia author Jin Young passes away. So that's the headline here. We're describing Jin Young as being legendary, which means he's the stuff that legends are made made of. This guy's a legend, so if you use it as an adjective, you say legendary. The legendary story, the legendary writer, the legendary musician, etc.
Or you could describe someone just saying, oh, he's a legend. Legends don't have to be dead. They can actually still be alive. So if someone's had a really amazing career, that's how we'll often refer to them as a living legend, right? The living legend so-and-so. So I haven't read any wuxia myself, but wasn't Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon an wuxia story?
Yeah, I think it was, actually.
Okay. Well, that's my only association with wuxia then. But that was a great film, I must say. I quite enjoyed it. So he's a celebrated author. If you're celebrated, people have given you a lot of accolades, a lot of awards, compliments. People know of you. They think you're pretty great. So he's a celebrated author.金庸and his novels are some of the most widely read in contemporary Chinese language literature. And if you're talking about contemporary anything, it's modern. It's what's happening today. So read in contemporary Chinese language literature. So all of the contemporary authors, he's still one of the most widely read, even though he probably did a lot of his writing when he was much younger than maybe when he was in his 90s. He died at age 94 on October 30th, 2018. We found out his real name was Louis Cha. Cha Liangyong was his real Chinese name, and he was known for his novels in the wuxia genre. Genre is a classification. It's a way we divide things into classes. For example, we have different musical genre. We have classical, hip-hop, jazz, country western. In literature, we have romance, we have detective novels, we have nonfiction, we have lots of different types of writing. And his particular genre was the wuxia. Tom, you're more familiar with wuxia. How would you describe that in English?
Yeah, it's tough to translate. I think one time when I went to the Eslite bookstore, or Sleet, or however you say it, they had this category labeled as novels of chivalry.
Oh.
That's what they called this in English, but I thought, well, that's nice, but I don't think it really translates the word wuxia ideally.
Yeah.
So that's why we're saying wuxia here, because that term is difficult to translate into English. It involves martial arts and heroes and stuff like that, and poetry. We'll just call it wuxia, and that's how we're going to try to sell this book in the bookstore. So yes, indeed, he was well known in this genre, and Louis Cha, of course, was his real name, at least his name in English here. And, well, wuxia is a style that is characterized by martial arts and adventure. So martial arts just refers to different ways of fighting. My understanding, though, is that is a part of it, yes, but there are other things going on in wuxia novels that are hard to translate. But they have adventures. They're going all over the place, riding horses, and there are heroes, and there are damsels in distress, and there's magic and sorcery and evil and good, and all these things mixed together. So, of course, that is a pretty complex genre of writing, but hey, he's pretty well known in this genre in China and other Chinese language communities around the world.
I know one time I looked it up, they had said that these were knights in the Chinese, in Chinese literature. But they go on adventures. They have great martial arts skills, which is always fun for us to watch. They use swords. So they've got a lot of skills, but yeah, it's nothing we have in Western literature, really, to compare to. That's as close as we can get. So if you saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, you probably saw a good example of wuxia, the genre at least. It's characterized by martial arts and adventure, as Tom said. He's credited with helping revive the genre in modern times. If you revive something, guys, you bring it back to life. We'll often use this word on people who have maybe had a heart attack, their heart stopped beating, they were dead for a while. They either had a heart attack or maybe they had a stroke or, their heart just stopped beating. So if you're in the emergency room, they can shock you and they can shock that heart into starting again. If they do that, we can say that patient was revived. So you restore something to life, or something regains life or consciousness or strength. Here, if you revive a genre, it just means something that was popular in the past and fell out of popularity. People weren't doing so much of it anymore. It got popular again. Somebody helped revive it. Maybe it's fashion. We often have fashions that come back into style. Somebody will revive an old style. Maybe they revive the 30s, or the 20s look. So that's what revive means. He's credited, or he's given credit for having helped revive the genre, and is known as part of the tripod of wuxia, along with the authors Gu Long and Liang Yuxiang. So these three guys were all part of that revival of wuxia literature.
They're calling them the tripod of wuxia. Tripod, of course, is a special kind of instrument that you can put your camera on to take photographs at night, for example, or of birds or whatever.
A three-legged something.
Yep, a three-legged platform or something like that. So this is kind of, I guess you could say this is kind of the trinity of wuxia writers as well. And from 1955 to 1972, Cha published 14 wuxia novels and novellas as Jinyong. So that was his period of activity there until 1972. Novels, of course, are longer, novellas are shorter, and he used the pen name Jinyong, which our lovely assistant here, Jessie, said is just his last character, the last character of his name, split in two, Jin Yong. And he mainly released these in installments via the Hong Kong newspaper Ming Bao, which he co-founded. So, yes, indeed, back in those times, novels were released part by part, bit by bit in a newspaper in installments.
Chapter by chapter.
Indeed, an installment could be the payment you make on a loan. Like, for example, my wife and I recently bought a new car, so we have to make monthly installments. What is it, 15,000 NT or something like that, and we pay that for a couple of years or something like that. And so here he released them in the newspaper, I don't know, maybe a page in the newspaper or something like that, and he did that over several weeks until he actually had a full novel. And he did this in a newspaper in Hong Kong called Ming Bao, and he co-founded that newspaper with someone else.
Wow, so his writings blended history, poetry, fantasy, and Chinese philosophy to create deep, complex universes and characters. Complex can also be pronounced complex, so both are correct. So very, very complicated, you could say. Complex is complicated, has a lot of different things happening, a lot of parts, a lot of characters, and they're hard to translate because they're so complex or complex.
Indeed. So, yes, if you read these, there's a lot of stuff going on. Because his Chinese prose contains many layers of meaning, few of his books have been translated into other languages. So, of course, as you know, Chinese writing can have many layers of meaning that can mean all sorts of things. So, of course, that makes them difficult to translate. So, not a lot of those books have been translated, which means you basically change something from one language into another to translate. And translation is the noun. Yes, I haven't read any translations of Jin Yong's books because basically I know that they're probably going to be a far cry from the original. They're just not going to be able to translate everything. But if I try to read them in the original Chinese, that's difficult. My Chinese is not nearly good enough to be able to read those books. He uses a lot of classical language and characters I don't know. I've tried and I failed miserably.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to do. Today, his works continue to be celebrated through hundreds of movie, TV, and video game adaptations. An adaptation is where you take one form of something, for example, a novel, and you change it or adapt it so that people can make a movie out of it or make a play. So there are a lot of different ways you can adapt these sorts of things. So if you want to check him out, you might look into a movie or a TV show or maybe a video game. Right now we're going to take a quick break, but then we'll be back to talk about deaf-friendly Starbucks signing store that's open in the U.S. now.
Okay, now let's talk about our second featured news story in our News Watch program today. In our All English lecture, we're talking about a Starbucks that's very special for deaf people in the United States. It's a deaf-friendly Starbucks, and it's a signing store. It opens in the U.S. Of course, if you communicate with deaf people, you use sign language, and when you do that, we say you are signing. You use that verb signing. So it's a store where the staff signs to the customers there, although I think some of them are, I guess, bilingual, you could say. There are probably some people working there who can actually hear you. If you don't know sign language, you can still order coffee there as well. So let's get to it here. Let's talk about this new Starbucks that's opening in Washington, D.C. Starbucks recently made waves by opening a unique new signing store in Washington, D.C., USA. So here we've got this phrase to make waves, which means you kind of cause a commotion. You get a lot of attention for doing something that is very influential, and a lot of people know about it. So they made waves. It can be good or bad. You know, you can make waves if you have a scandal or something like that. You can become known for that. But in this particular case, I think they're known for doing something really cool here by opening this unique store. Unique just kind of means special, one of a kind.
Yeah. If someone calls you unique, that's not a bad thing to be. You're only one of a kind. You're unlike anybody else or anything else that people have run into. Very unique. It's better to be called unique than strange or weird. So if you want to be nice, you'll use that word unique to describe someone who's a little different, perhaps. It seems like a lot of kids these days all want to be unique. I see a lot of kids who are expressing their personalities through different hairstyles or fashion or even music. Some people get into music to express themselves. So it's a very unique new signing store in D.C. Washington, D.C. is where the government of the United States is located. Much of the store staff, as Tom said, is deaf or hearing impaired. If you're hearing impaired, it means you can hear some sounds. Typically, hearing impaired folks will wear hearing aids. I have a first cousin, one of my favorite people in my family, who is hearing impaired. I remember when he was born, he's younger than I am, and at first we didn't know he was deaf. I think we figured out he was deaf by the time he was 2.5. He wasn't completely deaf. He heard sounds. And Dave can talk, but you can tell when he talks that he has a problem with hearing because he can't form all of the consonant sounds. He sounds a little different, but he functions normally in life because of his hearing aids. But hearing impaired means exactly that. There's something that's preventing your hearing from being perfect or normal. So impaired just means there's something wrong with it. If you're deaf, typically you're all deaf. And those folks can't hear any sounds. And a lot of them can, well, all these people that work at the Starbucks at least, can communicate using American Sign Language. I wanted to mention, because some people don't know this, although it should probably be obvious, but there are different ways to do sign language. So people who sign in, say, Brazil probably can't communicate everything with people who sign in America. They use different motions and different ways to represent different things depending on where you learn sign language. So you need to say it's American Sign Language. It could be another form of sign language in another area of the world.
Yeah, a lot of hearing people make that mistake. Oh, if you know sign language, you can communicate with anybody else in the world.
Yeah.
No, that's not the case. You still need to know the individual sign languages of their specific countries. The one here in Taiwan, of course, is different from American Sign Language, although I'm sure there are a lot of things that are similar, so you might be able to communicate some way. But in any case here, ASL is American Sign Language, and that's the language that American deaf people use to communicate. Now, the location in D.C., or Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, and that's their second signing store, which they decided to open after the success of the first one in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So they already opened such a store in Malaysia there. If, of course, you were deaf and you went there, you were able to order your Frappuccino by signing it instead of trying to write it down on a piece of paper or pointing at the menu or something like that. But, of course, the ironic thing here is that our deaf listeners can't listen to our program, but maybe it's available in Braille or something. I don't know. But in any case here, we're talking about this with people who can hear. And, of course, they were successful with their first store in Malaysia, and they decided to open another signing store in Washington, D.C.
Now, the shop possesses a number of features aimed at improving accessibility for the hard of hearing. So when you have a feature that you're offering, it's something special about your store that you can point out. One of the features they have is that customers' names are actually shown on a board. So I know some of the new McDonald's now, the one in 101, if you've been there, they will take your order and then on a sign above where the orders are taken, it'll have your order number. If it's up and ready, it will let you know when it's done and you can come and pick it up. It's kind of that, except instead of using numbers, they're using people's names. Because I guess Starbucks has always asked for a name when you place an order. I don't drink coffee, so I've never had to go to Starbucks and given them my name. Sometimes I'll get a sandwich, but they still don't take my name. It seems like they only take your name when they're making some sort of special drink for you. But this is one of the special features. If you want to improve accessibility, you're talking about making it easier for people to use or get at something. One of the things that we're trying to make accessible to everyone around the world is just something as simple as clean water. Clean water, because some of these countries in very poor areas of the world have a hard time just getting access to clean water. Or you might have your internet go down in your apartment or in the building or neighborhood and say, yeah, I don't have internet access, which means you can't get online. Accessibility just means the ability to use something, to reach something, or to enter something. Here, they've actually added some really nice features for the hard of hearing. That's another way to talk about people who can't hear. Normally, you can be deaf, which is you're completely without hearing ability. Hearing impaired and hard of hearing are similar. I use those two phrases interchangeably.
Right. Hard of hearing does not mean you're deaf. It just means you have difficulty hearing. Like my grandmother, when she was in her 80s, she was hard of hearing, so we always had to talk really loudly when we spoke to her.
Did she hate hearing aids?
Yeah, she didn't want to wear one because she thought it would damage her hearing more.
Oh.
So she asked us to simply talk louder to her, again, because she was hard of hearing. So indeed, when their orders are ready, customers' names are displayed on a screen, like you said, instead of being called out. They might call them out also, maybe if they're blind people in there, or if they're regular hearing people in there. They could probably do both, display the name and call the name out. But in this particular case, for deaf people or hearing impaired people, the name is displayed on the screen, and customers and staff can also type back and forth to order via a two-way keyboard at the counter. So indeed, if they need to communicate besides sign language, or if the person at the cash register just doesn't happen to understand, they can type out the messages on a keyboard that's right there at the counter that can help aid in communication.
The other thing they have is the signing store is located near a big university for the deaf community. It's called Gallaudet University. It's the world's only university with a curriculum that's entirely designed around the deaf community. So I know there are lots of universities that offer classes for the deaf or the hearing impaired, but this particular university is really focused only on the deaf community. So Gallaudet University is the name of it. I bet some of our listeners may have heard of it before. If you have a curriculum, it means the classes that are offered somewhere. We use it more, I think, in university than we do in, say, high school. Typically, it's more of a university word, curriculum. What's your curriculum like this semester? So when you talk about a community of people, especially here we're talking about the deaf community, it's a group of people that share similar characteristics or traits who come together for some common purpose. We often talk about the community. I had a musical community that I hung out with in New York where we sang together in different places. And we used to always, share information together. The deaf community, of course, would have different activities than other communities. And you can have artistic communities. You can have communities that are focused on sports. There are lots of different groups of people that come together, and we can call them a community.
Absolutely, and of course there's a deaf community here in Taiwan. I think there's a school in Taipei called the Taipei School for the Hearing Impaired, which is on Chengde-lu. So, of course, if you have problems hearing or if you're deaf, of course, that community will take care of you there. So, indeed, this university is designed for the deaf community in the United States, and it already seems that its students and staff are thrilled to have a place off campus where they can communicate freely and easily. So, if you're a member of the deaf community, you probably feel that, well, we have to hang out with other deaf people. It's difficult to communicate with hearing people. They don't know sign language. They probably don't have patience for us, so it's probably best that we just kind of stay to our own community, stay on campus here at Gallaudet University. But they're thrilled, they're happy that they can actually leave the campus and go to a Starbucks where they can actually feel like anybody else. They can communicate freely with the staff there, order a cup of coffee, sit down, and hang out there for hours and enjoy the day just like anybody else can.
Yep, and many hope the store will help bring together the deaf and hearing people and showcase diverse possibilities for communication. If you showcase something, guys, it's like you're showing it off. You're displaying it. You're letting people get a look. A showcase. We'll often have showcases in either museums or some people even have them in their homes if they have expensive collectibles. A showcase would be a glass case used for displaying things of value, typically in a shop, a museum. My mom has a showcase for her pieces of Yadro, which are that's what she used to collect.
Yadro, what's that?
Oh, you don't know what Yadro is?
No, I don't.
It's a type of porcelain art. They make it in Spain. Yeah, it's beautiful. Look it up. She has quite a few pieces. Anyway, diverse here just means showing a great deal of variety, lots of different kinds. It's fun to live somewhere that has a diverse range of people and food and entertainment and activities. That's always a good thing. So they want to showcase diverse possibilities for communication.
Okay, so there you have it. Those are our two news stories for today about wuxia author passing away. Jin Young passed away. And the signing Starbucks that opened in Washington, D.C. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. We hope you learned something new. So from all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.